Hi, guys, and welcome to another episode of From the Root to the Fruit. I'm your host, Jay Smith. Today's guest is a wonderful human. Uh, she's a mother of three, very driven, very motivated, also very charitable, does a tremendous amount in the community, outreach, whether it's uh, homeless shelters, feeding the sick, working with our church. She's very committed to give back in every way possible. Also, just happens to be my wife, my queen, my person. I'm very interested in getting into this conversation and kind of. I don't know that I'll find out more as much as I feel like it's a great treat to give you guys a level of transparency into kind of the inner workings and how we get along on the day-to-day basis. With no further ado, the real boss, Dawn Smith. My person, the real boss, the actual person in charge in here.
Not true. Not true.
Well, 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 that is very much debatable, I suppose. I really there's not a whole lot that I don't know. Like I
That's
so I mean I pride myself on making sure all the couch cushions are searched through anyway. But I did want to make sure that we got on here. This is a treat for me uh, to give a live look in. There's been a great deal of feedback that we are, and despise this, but couple goals and all that, like there's a tremendous amount of pride with that. I appreciate it, but
for sure.
that's not the reason. The reason is my own psychosis, I think, a little bit, as well as the need for family and something that has a foundation that we can stand and build and create on. So I want to get into like your upbringing, my own, and kind of what brought us here, and some of the challenges and difficulties that we've had to kind of get to this point, and kind of what's next for us.
All right. Bring it on.
Growing up in Beaufort,
Yeah.
what was that like for you?
So Beaufort was, I think we moved there when I was 8. And we moved around a lot at first. We lived in some apartments in this little town, or in this sort of main road in downtown. You joke with me occasionally. I spent a lot of time hanging out in the graveyard across the street. I'm not really sure what the allure was, but maybe it was before my time understanding a little bit more of the circle of life. But there's also a lot of rich history in that town. So it's a really small coastal town in North Carolina. And the graveyard that we lived across the street from was just a normal graveyard, but there are a lot of historical graveyards there too. And so I think understanding the historical graveyards gave me a different appreciation for it. And then, or maybe I was an emo kid who there was a touch of that, I'm sure, sprinkled in. But we were free range. I mean, again, I lived in a little town called Otway for a while. We lived in Pine Shores before settling into what I would refer to now as my childhood home in Beaufort on Lennoxville. And so it's a lot of time spending riding bikes, exploring the woods, definitely time spent on the water, on the beach, learning to sail a sunfish, excuse me, being a bit mischievous in adventures. I laugh now when we go back at seeing, my mom worked at hotels a lot. And if I could get up in the morning and during the summer or on the weekends to get to work with her, I could spend all day at the beach. And growing up with not a lot of money, it was an interesting dichotomy because I was sort of Angie's kid, so everybody knew me at the hotel, and I could roam pretty freely there, and be in the pool or spend the time on the beach and get drinks from the um, little bar or restaurant and the little mocktails from the pier house. And but also, especially with my cousin Jesse, when they came down from Raleigh, we would go and roller skate or rollerblade around and try and jump over signs that you weren't supposed to jump over because you weren't supposed to be rollerblading in that area, or jump off the pier and there are signs everywhere not to do that. And of course, as a kid, you're like, well, that's just silly. They're just adults that don't want us to have fun. Never mind that the pier has been blown down multiple times by hurricanes. And so they really just don't want you to impale yourself on the old
Right.
pylons that are there in the water. Um, Tricky adults trying to make sure you stay safe and alive. It's weird. Um,
Yeah.
so it was a lot of celebrating, laugh often that I grew up in the bars in Beaufort, the Dock House and the Back Bar. My parents were social, my mom and my stepdad. So we spent a lot of time out, or having parties in, or going to someone's house for a solstice, drumming and party. And it was, I often would say I was raised by hippies, because there was a lot of just that connection to the earth, the ocean. Papa always had a garden of some sort. I did not, unfortunately, inherit his green thumb. I spent a lot of time working with Papa on, I wouldn't say a lot of time, not now looking back, not as much as I'd wished, but he was a self-employed and is a self-employed carpenter. Um, so, some of my favorite memories would be things like, um, preparing for hurricanes, boarding up the shops in downtown Beaufort, and or working on boats, gutting the cabinets and sanding or teaking, just things that I learned to do from him. Again, not often enough, but the memories stand out for sure. I would say also I grew up in a town in the southeast, so there's a lot of inherent prejudice in that area. My high school was is in this interesting position where you can go into the town where I grew up of Beaufort, and that's what I would say even today is more of the integrated part of that district for that high school. But if you go this way, you go to all these beautiful towns down east. But even to this day, the majority of those kids don't go to school with any person of color until they hit high school. And so, I grew up around racial slurs of all sorts. I didn't understand some of even the things that people would say to me that were horrible racist jokes about Asian people, or terms that they would call me. And so it was interesting trying to find yourself in that environment, and a constant relearning, and trying to identify with people that you felt were good and had similar interests, but there was something, an underlying issue that was accepted in a way that's really confusing as a kid. I think that looking back on it's an interesting ride, to grow up
Well,
in a little
and
town like
and
that.
and to that point, a lot of situations, right? Like exposure leads to expansion. So if you don't have people that look like, if everybody looks like you, then what's the big deal? Everything
Yep.
sounds the same. There's no reason or need to grow unless you just inherently have that motivation, right? Like you,
Yep.
even as a a young kid of similar backgrounds to that degree, just because I you don't see a lot of people that look like you, so you start to assimilate,
Hmm.
right? Whether it be for me, it was my third grade teacher. Uh, Shout out Miss Albardi. Uh, she uh, kept mispronouncing my name, and I don't know that it was on purpose. It's moot, but it caused me to understand that although my name is not difficult at all to me,
Mm-hmm.
but I never actually, even growing up, my family didn't call me by my name, so it wasn't really a big deal,
Yeah.
right, in that regard. But once I left that area, it became apparent to me that it was bothersome. Like I've gone by Jay since then. The only person,
Mm-hmm.
and I used to tell this story all the time. The only person that called me my entire name, aside from obviously my wife, was my grandmother. She
Granny.
was the
Yeah.
only person that called me by my entire full name, and it was just kind of how it was. But it's I don't know the fix or the causality for that, but the I guess there's a long way to say I understand it. It makes sense. It's sad and it's pitiful and whatever, but I get it.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, before Beaufort, I would just say we moved, my parents were very young, um, and divorced before I remember them being together. And so I was born in Kentucky. We lived, what I remember is my mother and I living with my grandparents. Um, and then moving with them actually to North Carolina. I remember the years before that though, because I think I was in first grade. I just started first grade when we were moving. And the street that my grandmother lived on, there was my best friend a couple of doors down one way, and then another great friend a couple of doors down the other way, and across the street. And we were in and out all the time. So I remember little fragments of that, and then going to between my parents' houses or to my grandfather's house in the West End of Louisville, spending time with family. I mean, my mom's family had already started to move away a bit. My dad's family was all there still in Louisville, and so there was a lot of just family around all the time. I was around family and cousins all the time.
Right.
And then when we moved to Winston, we lived with one of my mother's older brothers for a bit before we lived in our own place. And so I had cousins there for a while. Winston was really hard for me. Funny to move to North Carolina and have be surrounded by these, still really Southern accents, but the kids picked on me a great deal for my accent from Kentucky, and it is different. It sounds slightly different. Um, but I remember that period of my life being unsettled, and I don't recall any of those kids really being friendly to
Right.
me. And then, we were there for not very long before we moved and moved to Beaufort. Just my mom and I.
So would you say that time, right, like you being unsettled, not having an anchor, but obviously your mom's legit, love her, do anything for her, shout out mama. The Her trying to find the best proper way to ensure that you were growing up the way that you should,
Hmm.
right, like that obviously was the antithesis of the moving and everything else. What uh that comes with a price, right, like an unknown, but you feeling unsettled, did that lead to any more uh outbursts or acting out or anything like that, or was it you were just status quo?
Uh, Gosh, I guess I would say I'm not. Uh, hmm. I probably both and more of the former. I would say, my grandparents had a great deal of foundation or oh my gosh, I'm blubbering all over the place. Um, my grandparents contributed a great deal to the foundation of, they were devout Catholic. They were family. My granddad, even though at this point he wasn't working as much, he was still working quite a bit.
Mhm.
I'd say my grandma was a hustler in a lot of ways. She was always trying. something, working the bingos or selling these like toy chests, the same types of stuff that happen now where people sell Pampered Chef or all those things. She had a toy thing that she did for a while. And so having some of that form my early years and just that always having family to lean on and if you needed something there was always someone there that could help. That was a huge piece of my foundation. And then but moving around, I think um I don't know, I was just kind of a wild kid sometimes, so maybe it did. I don't know that I realized for a very long time how much effort my mom put into trying to give me everything my heart desired. There were many times when she worked multiple jobs, and but she would still find a way to have her butt in the stands. Anytime I had an event, whether it was a game I was playing or coaching. She and Papa coached my softball team. Shout out Seagulls. I still have a trophy, which my
Seagulls
husband loves
still
to.
has it. She still has the
I don't think I
trophy.
have it anymore, but I did have it for a long time.
Oh no, we
Um,
got it. We got
and
it.
there's a
We
picture of
got it.
me playing in Keds,
Love it.
softball in Keds.
Shout out to softball flavored kids.
Ah, not sure how that worked at all. Helmet, bat on my shoulder, Keds on my feet. But she was always there, and it's interesting because for a long time I didn't realize how that wasn't necessarily shaped by the fact her parents couldn't often show up to things that they were doing. And so it doesn't mean a brother or sister wouldn't have been in the stands necessarily, um, but that was important to me at the time for sure. But I don't know that I realized for a very long time, maybe not until we have our own kids, that how much it took for her to do that. And so it was both. I mean, I was a wild kid sometimes, um, and I'm sure there were a lot of contributing factors to that. How long do you have? Should I lay down on the couch and have you therapy me for a bit
Oh
to get to the
yes,
bottom of
yes,
it?
by all means. By all means.
Gonna turn the camera off for a bit.
I think it's a testament to how hard your mom worked. I see a lot of that in you.
Mhm.
By that I mean you it is family first, right? Like whether it's you'll put whatever on hold if it's a thing, and I've spoken on this podcast quite a few times about that mom guilt, where you
Mhm.
feel like you're if you leverage one side that needs to be taken care of, it's it's diminishing returns no matter what. Like you're almost doomed to lose something that you value or whatever in those situations. And I don't know that we'll solve that here, but I think that's I don't know where that comes from. I
Yeah.
guess for me it's obviously different, right? Like I'm very diligent in how I parent and how I relation, but the I don't feel guilty when I can't, because there's some real tangible reason that I missed something or I wasn't there for something, or and those are few and far between, but it's still I never feel that.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's my I'm working on it, my lack of empathy, but or my willingness to if I feel like it's the right thing to do, I really don't care. It doesn't even register to me that it might be somebody else's feelings, and we'll get into that. I'm sure it's much to your chagrin in quite a few cases, but I it does not move the meter for me if I feel like it's the right thing to do. That's just what I'm going to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of the societal norm or expectation, and I kind of cringe at using the word norm, but that's just ingrained in us for so long. And what's interesting, though, I think, is um, I don't think our parents' generation necessarily had that expectation that their parents were going to always be at everything. And so
Right.
there's been for our generation of parents a bit of a shift too into more of a hovering. Um, comes probably a lot with information. You see all these uh, everything that's happening around you in a big scale, an enormous amount of information that we wouldn't otherwise have without social media and the internet and
Right.
all of these things. Um, but the role of the woman for so long being put in this nice little box of expectation to be the homemaker and all of those things that um, any deviation from that comes with just a long standing set of expectation that brings in that guilt, right?
Right.
Like if I think you and Dwayne were talking about it, right? Like in an earlier podcast that even letting go of not being the one to race home and make dinner, or, us having to figure out here kind of that complete flip where you're home with the kids and I'm away at work and having to kind of set expectations and know what those the spaces are that we both need to kind of get leave everything else at where it needs to be so that we can have what we need, you and I, but also what we need as a family, to strike that right balance, without all of that societal expectation of what a woman's role and a man's role should be in a family. And I'm encouraged that I think it continues to evolve rightfully in a lot of ways. And but it takes a lot of work to get through that, and the mom guilt. Um, some of that is personal, and not just societal, right? Like,
Right.
is it really harming my kids if I'm on a business trip and can't make that one game? Um, Probably
Probably.
not.
Probably. That it
And
probably
then,
is.
and then you show up to the tournaments or the game and they don't want to be with you anyway. They want to be hanging out with their teammates. And it's not lost on me though that they appreciate the moments that you're there. But there's a lot of good sometimes that comes from um, understanding and seeing the sacrifices parents have to make for your children to understand that, for your children to get to see everything isn't always about them. There's especially when children are blessed to have an upbringing that isn't doesn't come with a lot of want, right?
Right.
To have some of that balance, I think we lose sight of that sometimes in thinking, being so worried that we are missing out or our kids are going to miss out on something because we don't have every single moment sketched out the exact way we see it or I think it should be.
And some of that, right, is it's and you made it. I mean, I think that was a perfect summation. It's self-inflicted because we believe that we, by something that we're doing or not doing,
Hmm.
uh, it will trigger whatever their future selves are going to become. And you can go nature, nurture, whatever. There's some stuff there. I think us working on having our kids being emotionally intelligent,
Hmm.
and understanding kind of what they're going through and how they feel it, but have a better understanding. And I feel like a lot of my, I'll speak for myself, so a lot of my my shortcomings growing up, coming up, where I had two modes, and that was super angry or ridiculously happy. There's a plethora of emotions in and around all of those, but not tapping into or having people around you that had a understanding of who they were,
Hmm.
uh, to a degree, and so they can lead you and help you navigate not what they feel about how you feel, but how you actually feel. I think there's a tremendous value in that, but and trying to break some cycles and make some changes that are very much needed before. I don't want my kids to, or our kids, I don't want our kids to feel as though they have to have a lid on their jar, or they can't feel a certain way, or they can't emote or what have you when they're 30, and then
Hmm.
they're in my case they're fighting people in the streets and in cages and whatever, trying to get those emotions out when the problem could have been solved in a much different and more calm way, but that makes them feel like they're helpless. When you can't govern your own emotions, you feel helpless,
Mm-hmm.
like you genuinely do. Like when people come and ask you, it's a mental health thing amongst other things, but when people come and ask you, well, what's wrong? Well, you give them the example of what's wrong, and what usually set me off was it wasn't that big a deal to them. Why are you acting like this about it?
Mm-hmm.
That's that makes you feel like your emotions aren't valued. Now, yeah, it didn't have to go to the end of the earth. Yeah, what do you know? But the point or purpose was the same, and trying not to pass that along to our kids, and giving them the space to be who they are, not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily who we want them to be, but who they are, and loving them through that, and because of that and everything else. I think there's a tremendous value in that.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it's a journey. There's I think um, I'm learning. We come, or maybe we don't come from a generation, but I'm learning, at least in some circles, you have this want to make situations comfortable for yourself, and in doing that, where you feel like you're encouraging the person who's going through something, you're actually discounting their feelings, you know.
Right.
Um, and we come from the south, so from the south, so one of if you're going through something, it's going to be all right, just pray through it, these kind of
Right.
things, and which is meant to be an encouragement, but it doesn't acknowledge where the person is right then, like,
Yeah.
gosh, that sucks. Shit. I wish you didn't have to go through that. I can't imagine going through that. That just sucks. And that acknowledgement of it makes the person not experiencing it just enough uncomfortable where you're sitting in it a bit with them. And that's so
Right.
powerful to be able to do that, to sit with someone in their grief and acknowledge that or their anger or whatever that thing is that they're feeling, instead of trying to make it feel better in that moment. And there's way maybe that's it. Sitting with them in that is what makes them feel better, but you got to have that discomfort for a minute to get to that place, rather than just kind of shoo it into like, it'll go away. It'll be fine. Don't
It'll
worry.
be, yeah. Yeah.
Because then you miss that pushing through. And I don't know, it's a little bit invalidating, in ways that I didn't realize for a very long time, because it was normal. It's kind of what we did. It's how
Right.
you deal with situations that are not happy and great.
And we joke, right? Like it's for me, I'm the person you would want to call if you want to get over whatever it is,
Yeah.
because I'm not really good at, like, having lost my parents at an early age, lost my grandparents
Yeah.
subsequently after that. Like it, I'm not the person to come to if you've lost something, and or you're in pain, for the simple reason that I'm still in pain. Like I'm not in the commiserate space. So
Yeah.
if we're going to do something about it, if you want to utilize that energy to create something new, or a platform or whatever, oh, I'm on deck for that. Let's go get it. If
Yeah.
it's a situation where you just want to be sad, and you require me to give you empathy, and like I'm just not built that way. I will hear you and understand you, and almost every person that I've had on here that that knows me or knows of me, uh I don't judge, because not because I don't care, but I I think it's more important what you're trying to do next.
Hmm.
Like what are you going to do now? Like you've lost everything, you have nothing, whatever the case may be. What are you going to do now?
Yeah.
I'm really not good at and I'm working on it. Mm, my my queen, my church, my stuff. I'm trying to get there. It's just difficult, like coming from my background, and being raised the way that I was. Like it's you're going to go through something. It's going to be catastrophic, and it just happened to be at an early age where, okay, you still got to go to school. Okay, well, you people still have a level of expectation for you to perform.
Yeah.
Not make me a bicycle clown, but to that effect, like, okay, yeah, you're sad, but why aren't you doing what you're supposed to be doing?
Yeah,
So it's tough. I think it's tough. Your college is ECU,
it is.
Eastern Carolina University. I did not realize that they had a football team, um, but apparently they do,
Mhm.
which is that's peculiar. At any rate, I digress. You're all right. Tell me a little
Funny
bit
guy.
about your college life and subsequently some of the relationships that you made while you were there.
So I was wanted to go into the Air Force. Papa was in the Air Force. I wanted to be a fighter pilot. For a while before, I think it was in middle school, maybe early high school. I wanted to learn how to fly, and there's something called the Civil Air Patrol, which usually is hosted out of an airport. We have a really small airport in Beaufort. Um, I mean, it doesn't do commercial flights, but they would have allowed us Civil Air Patrol to be there if you could generate enough interest, people, funding, etc. I couldn't, so we didn't have one. But so funny, Papa took me to an ECU NC State game, and jokingly, he wanted me to go to ECU. And jokingly, I said, well, whoever wins this game is my senior year. Whoever wins this game is the college I'll go to. And ECU won that game,
Uh,
FYI.
I can't speak to the point of purpose of that
Uh, and
the anecdote, but yep, I'm with you. Go ahead.
But when I late decided not to go to the Air Force, because I couldn't be a fighter pilot because women weren't fighter pilots then in the late 90s. Um, I late reg to ECU. I didn't stay on campus. My best friend at the time had registered at the community college there, and we decided to get an apartment. And so I worked a lot. I started at Lone Star, and um, went to school full time. I met it. That was the first year I think we lived together in the apartment. I met some folks at Lone Star and moved in with one of the other servers there, and her roommate, who Holly, who is now one of my best friends, and has been ever since. We partied like crazy. Unfortunately, maybe took that a little bit more serious than I took my schooling sometimes. Um, but she's my roll dog. She's been there through it all. No judgment through many mistakes that I made. I didn't finish college. It's one of those interesting things that is a regret to a certain degree, but also I was good at school. It came easily to me to do studies, and to not have to study super hard to do well most of the time. I didn't apply myself as much as I could even in high school, and was in a class of less than 200, I think, but graduated 10th in my class. And I don't mean that as a brag, just to say I
Take it,
that
own it,
it
own it.
came naturally to me to absorb and
Shout out
consume stuff.
to whoever came in 199th. How you feel about that?
I don't think it was even that many people. It's probably like 150. Um, but I just made a lot of great connections there. There were a lot of really important people in my life, a lot of whom, this is one of the good things about social media. I've been able to keep in some contact with, and I'm very blessed and fortunate to see how far they've come. I've had other roommates after I moved out of with Holly and Jessica, and still being able to connect with some of them and some of my old coworkers from different service industry jobs that I held, has been meaningful to me, especially since I didn't go through the path the way that I had intended to, or the way that I would expect. But it's why I'm here. Was a young mom, 29 days before I turned 21. Kyler was born, and so it was a good experience. ECU is known to be a party school, and I didn't try and change that narrative, clearly. Um, so yeah, it was a piece of my life that was a lot of fun, but also I kind of just didn't do the things the right way. And so it took me on a different course for a while, and I had to work really hard to get where we are today because of that, because of those choices, and because of the way I set myself back by not being responsible for some of them in the way that I should have been. My finances, as an example, and rebuilding everything to refine your way. It's really, we joke all the time, and having, Kyler having to decide what he's going to do as a 16-year-old boy or seven, all these questions that start coming at you as you start your, end your sophomore year, start your junior year of high school. What do you want to be? What do you want to do? And shit, sometimes I'm not sure I know at almost
Yeah, no
40.
kidding.
And to have our kids trying to decide that, it's a lot. It's a lot, and it's some of these kids have it nicked somehow, but I would say most of them, it's kind of silly for us to expect that from any generation at that age. But anyway, I'm rambling. ECU was a lot of fun, but yeah, it seems so far away at this
Like,
point in my life.
well, and that's a part of it, right? And I understand ECU is very lax on their academics, is what you're telling me. That's my takeaway. Um,
It's not what I'm
I would.
telling you at
I'm
all.
not. I mean, I'm just putting up what you're telling me. Very
Mhm.
lax, very unstructured university. I don't know that. I
Hate,
don't know
hate,
that to be
hate.
true from my own experience. I'm just listening, like I said, to what you were saying and kind of extrapolating my own opinion
Uh-huh.
off of that. Uh, what were the, aside from, and obviously in the earlier podcast, Jesse was making some, she came to the table and finally understood her deep-seated passion to have me as a part of her immediate family. So what kind of put you on the path to you and I being together?
Oh gosh. Um, well, Jesse has known you longer, which blew our daughter's mind for a very long time.
Yeah,
She
she
couldn't
was
make
in
sense of
denial
that.
for, yeah, she's like, no, that's not real. You're liars.
Um, but I was living in the Outer Banks and wanted to move closer to my family, and needed to find work, and contacted Jesse, and got a job short term at uh, Jillian's. I was expected to work there longer, and I didn't stay very long. So sorry, Chaz. I also not sure she wasn't glad to see me go, because I refused to work the beach. Things that I didn't want to do, just wasn't comfortable with at that point. I don't know why. I was being prudish, I guess. I don't know. Trying to quickly reverse all the craziness that had happened in my life before then. But you and I worked together at that point for like 3 to 5 weeks. I keep saying it was about 3 weeks that I worked there, but I'm not sure how long it was. I think it was longer. Um, but didn't really notice each other. Didn't. I'm good at remembering faces though. So a couple of years later, when I think my work was having a party or something. No, no. Oh my gosh, why am I forgetting this? My friend was moving out here to Moses Lake. We
Mhm.
decided to come down to your bar. Not that it was you owned it, but where you were bartending at the time. Um, and I kept recognizing you. And I don't know if it was just you weren't especially kind.
Not a lot's changed.
um, but funny that I didn't know at the time, or I didn't realize this until you talked to Uncle Doug, um, but that they Uncle Doug and Aunt Joanne started with a drive home, basically with him taking her home, and my friend April begged and begged and begged for you to drive my car home so that I could have drinks with her before she was heading out.
Mhm.
And the only way that happened was me calling Jesse and saying, you know, this guy, like, is this okay? It's basically, am I going to be murdered tonight if I let him drive my car home? Like, what's happening? And she totally vouched for you. And then after that, you know, I think what led us to each other is, one, we were kind of at the point of our lives that was no bullshit, no games. And so brutally honest with each other whenever, you know, what we were looking for, what we wanted, what we needed, even in the very beginning, even though we were cutting ourselves off a lot from things that I think we actually needed. But it was at least very upfront and straightforward about where we were and no games. And I think, unfortunately, you put on a front a lot in leading into relationships, and we weren't doing that. And then we just kept running into each other, sometimes intentionally. You know, if I was out with friends having dinner or drinks and it was nearby, Stoolies, shout out Stoolies, no longer there. But you know, I would make it a point to stop by and have a beer there if you were there, and just say hi. And so, but in some ways, it really felt like the universe was forcing us to, like, okay, okay, you too, stop avoiding this. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think it was a lot of just that, being vulnerable in ways that we thought we weren't being vulnerable with each other, but starting out without that front. You know, especially at the time, my friend Tracy would always say, like, girls can contain the crazy. For like 3 years, we can contain the crazy and be who you need us to be. And you lovingly refer to it as the green crayon. You know, I pretend, especially with at that point in our lives with like football, and come over and you're like, I'm going to sit here and watch college football all day. And I'm like, okay, cool. And you're like, she doesn't really like football. No,
And for those of you
no, no, I
watching,
do.
it is called the green crayon paradigm. What that means is, glad you asked. What that means is, whoever that you meet, if they like green crayons, oh my gosh, you like green crayons? I've been coloring with green crayons my entire life since I was itty bitty. My grandmother used to bring me green crayons all the time. They always agree. Everything sound. Oh my goodness! You do you like ice cream? I love ice cream. Ice cream's the best thing that's ever happened. Then 3 months into the relationship, what tends to happen is they've gotten what they feel like they want, the best of you, out of that situation thus far. So now you're coloring with those very same green crayons. In this particular case, it's college football or football in general or sports or whatever. All of a sudden, that is the most ridiculous thing you could possibly be ever doing. You're still on those green crayons. I didn't think you would ever grow up. You're still touching green crayons. That is the green crayon
Yes.
paradigm. Everybody agrees until it's time to not agree.
But what I didn't understand is you didn't believe me, even if as we were watching football for a very long time, even though I could say, like, oh my gosh, why, like, that receiver was supposed to run a wheel. Why did he run that out route? And you're like, she doesn't know what she's talking about.
Well, and now you very much know I have a issue with trusting anybody to do anything that's not me. So that's yeah, that's where that stems from. They it sounds good. Yeah, yeah, uh-huh, yeah. And then
Not to get
waiting
it
for the other
twisted,
shoe
I am
drop.
still super amateur when it comes to understanding the game, but I know a little bit and I like it. I like watching it.
You know more than some of the coaches that I've come in contact with. So
I
that's
don't
fair.
the yeah. I struggle with the violence of it to some degree, especially with our kids playing, and still getting their bells rung, early ages and things like that. But
Yeah.
you know, it's an interesting game and one that I appreciate for when it's coached right, that the development of the team mentality and putting, you know, doing your job so that to protect the guy next to you, it's kind of beautiful, if we could just get those brains
And to get, I guess, to give some context, even when we first met, and I screwed this up with it with your mom when she came to meet me and everything else like that. Like it was, and for the full story, I'll go ahead and get into that. The Your mother, my
Yeah.
mom,
Mm-hmm.
came to visit me with one of her friends at the
Mm-hmm.
bar and introduced herself. She was very nice and very respectful and everything like this. I did not reciprocate that necessarily. The she basically said, and I'm paraphrasing. I'm Don's mom. She said, you know, you guys were seeing each other, or whatever. I just wanted to meet you and say hello. And I said, yeah, that's cool. Good for you. What would you like to drink? So uh, we have since, I'm one of her favorite people on the planet now,
She
but
was not super impressed, let's just
he
say.
was not,
But
I was
no,
not
good.
out to impress at
She was like,
all. That
he
was,
was, wow,
yeah,
wow.
I was not out to impress at all. But that was, I mean, I I still, I like to check the deck and make sure that everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing. I got trust issues, volumes, all types of stuff. So that's what it is. I'm not from the show me state, but I'm very much, you're gonna have to show me, and it's still, I won't believe you. So it's
4
tough.
volumes of that TR Encyclopedia Britannica, huh?
Yes. Yes, it's hard. It's hard. It's hard.
It is hard.
You grow up and you're in a situation like when I was a kid, uh, I'd watch a bunch of movies, right? Like and in all the Can't Buy Me Loves and all the, the rom coms or whatever, these comedies, you see these people have a disagreement and then come together, and you never get to see the happily ever after. It's just inferred. I always took it from the position of, I have never had a problem fighting, whether it be physically or emotionally or whatever, fighting for what I feel like, because I feel like that friction of the fight produces progress in a positive way.
Mhm.
Now, does that always work itself out? Not always, but more often than not. And that's how I've lived my life. So having disagreements, whether it's the people that we dated before or whatever, like, that would just end it for me. It cracked the foundation, because we weren't standing on anything substantial anyway. So it cracked the foundation, and now I just don't trust you. So I can't be with you anyway. That's always been the thing for me. So that, whether it's damaged or whatever, I own it. I know. I don't. I'll ask somebody to do something for me and then check on it 4 times. I'm that kind of person. So
Progress.
yes, and far from perfect. I don't know that I'll ever be, but I'm very much further along the road to progression than I originally was. But you were for me the the difference. That there was hope. There was hope of this person, and it was very much the, yep, this is your last shot, universe. That's it. If I I didn't want kids at the time, you had two.
Yep.
That was already like, I don't even know why we're sitting here. This is not going to work. But you did a fantastic job. We built a relationship then. Then it became something else, and that was, I think that you've done most of the work here, as far as that goes, because that was a non-starter. I mean, at the time, and I talked about it on the podcast with Jesse. Like, that was a non-starter for me.
Mhm.
If you had exes or whatever, or something tethering you to that that situation, I don't want any part of it. That's not going to be good for me, for a lot of reasons. One of them, as I've kind of peeled back my own personal onions, one of those major reasons is understanding a that I am a priority. I always felt like I can't be a priority if there's, right, like we have 3 humans that run around in the world.
Mhm.
They are priorities, obviously, and I know that on a daily basis it depends on where I am in that order, but I need to know that at some point I'm the star of the show. Like, that was always a point of emphasis for me, and I never believed that being in a relationship with someone with kids, and I had, at the time I didn't have any, so I felt like there's already a built-in way for me to lose. So what are we doing here? There's no reason to waste time. But much to your credit, you are Superwoman for real, because you made me feel as though I was the absolute show the whole time, until I recognized and took the lead and saw that, well, they're the show, we're the stage kind of thing, so we hold them up, and went about it that way. And it, like I said, and shout out to anybody that's going through some go through, and you've got a dude that you feel like he's got a, but there's some things he needs to work through. I'm not saying stay and be patient. I'm just saying they can turn out extremely well.
That is true. You got to see what's under the surface.
You got to
Really
do a whole lot. You had to do a whole lot of
dig,
digging. You had to
claw.
do. You had to
Yeah.
really, really. There's a lot of digging right here. You had to really, really dig. You got to get deep, because I was a tough nut to crack, and for a lot of different reasons. And but I genuinely credit you with all of it, because if even in the interactions that I have with our older two kids, and they are my kids, my older two kids, the interactions that we have, it was always you stepping back and letting me lead, and whatever I said was the way that it was, and that's it. There's always support in that regard. Even if we disagreed with what was going on, it's always been behind closed doors, where it's me and you, and then I'll go out and hat in hand it with the kids and figure it out. But uh, that you're the reason that all of this works, because
I don't know if
it's
it's fair to say always. That's been a journey too of understanding that um, there's nothing wrong with having conflict in front of your kids when you're able to um, when it's not about them, first of all. And
right.
we had moments of that, but that's certainly in the beginning of that. We're different. We say this all the time. Our parenting styles are very different. I'm a lead by feeling. I care about how you feel about this and how you work through
Yes,
that. And um, you're more of the traditional military and southeastern upbringing, child rearing, where
I
this
don't give a
is
shit how you feel.
adult.
I
Which
don't care
I
how
have
you
a
feel,
lot of.
about what was said. I don't. Let me be, so I'm super clear. I absolutely care how my kids feel. That matters a great deal to me. How my children feel about what I told them to do, I don't give a shit about that.
Um, so I mean, and I certainly had influences of that. I will call it militant style of parenting, but I don't mean it how I think sometimes that can sound. But that
Very,
very
very structured, very
strict a bit,
yeah,
structured. It's clear
conservative. Yeah,
expectation setting. Those things are super important to me too. It's not as comfortable for me, but important to me. I'd say learning how important it was for us to be a unit and parent together and take those moments of, hey, okay, we got a little out of our into our feelings, into our preferences rather than the actual
principles.
expectation a bit
Yep.
there. Having those conversations between closed doors both ways, so that the one of us who did that can go and rectify it ourselves versus conflicting each other there, because that creates those cracks for your children to dig in and create
Yeah,
space for
and
themselves.
children are
They
like
will. They will
that.
dig like jackhammers. um, but I, what I was saying before about having conflict in front of your children, there's not, screaming, saying things to each other that are out of turn, which there's arguably, hopefully, shouldn't be arguing that way anyway. Not that we haven't had our moments, but nothing egregious just, we were
No.
emotionally crippled at times when we were starting out and learning how to conflict too, which we've come a really long way. But I think there's something about your children understanding that even in, and especially in the most galvanized, loving relationship of your life, you aren't always going to see eye to eye. You're still going to be two very different people. And if they can see you sometimes in conflict and know that you can get through it and see how you get to resolution, then they learn from that. And they learn that a relationship doesn't have to be a certain way all the time. Because if all of your conflict is behind doors, closed doors, and all they see is this almost a facade, um,
Right.
then what they're seeking in relationships is something that isn't real and rocky and messy like relationships are. Any type of relationship that withstands time in your life, including your own with your kids. But I think there's some necessity to it as long as the content isn't about them, but also is things that will help them understand and see the importance of those tools that they need to build into their own relationships.
And I believe that there's a buffer, right? To your point about uh conflict resolution in front of your kids, right?
Mhm.
There's some value. We've always fought fair for all of the whatever, and we've gone through a tremendous amount of challenges and everything else. We are not above reproach. But the number one thing on the sheet has always been to fight fair. I don't say things when I'm upset to you, to you specific. I genuinely believe that you're the only person on the planet that is off limits for me. If even if I feel something, I won't say it to you when I'm upset. We'll sit down and it's a calm conversation or whatever. It's always from a place of what's most logical. It's hardly ever the, oh well, we just need to do this because we need to do this. It's always with reasoning, and because some, I believe that some bells you can't unring.
Mhm.
So if I'm more likely to believe someone who has had some drinks that has something to say, or tell, I believe I will take that to be truth over somebody looking me in my eye and talking to me with no congress whatsoever. Like and that goes back to I got trust issues. So there you go.
I think there's a little bit of truth to that. I think there are aspects of the psychological way we fight. Maybe psychological way isn't the right term. I'm certainly not in that field, so this is just opinion. But and I don't mean we, I just mean we as a people. But there's, and I come from this to a certain degree, or I don't know if I come from this, but I learned it at some point in my life where there are times enough when a fight gets uncomfortable and the instinct of that fight or flight is to shut it down, to say that thing that is just going to cease it at that moment
Yes.
because the anxiety of the continuation of the fight is too much. And so there isn't necessarily truth to what's being said in that moment or what that filter needs to shut down. It's how do I get this to stop? What is that thing that is going to get this to stop?
Right.
Um, Fortunately, I think I've, you know, I'm starting to rebuild the emotional connections in my brain, emotional intelligence to not have that reaction as much. But I think for a long time that was a protection element for me. And not to say that I rung bells that I shouldn't have, or to try and make excuses for anything that I may have said in it at any time. Um, Not that there are things that I'm sounds like I'm
Oh no,
talking
if
around
if
things
if I said it, I
cryptically.
meant, if I said it, I meant it. If I said it, I meant it.
But I mean, I guess I'm
That's
saying,
a good and a bad, I guess.
yeah, I guess I'm saying I think I understand why sometimes I don't agree with the argument that things that you would say in impassioned or um or with libations would necessarily have more of a ring of truth to them, because I can understand where that the I feel so bad and I'm shrinking, and because I don't know how to deal with this conflict, so I'm going to spew some sort of venom to protect myself so that
Right.
I can then go away. Um, I'm saying I understand that aspect of it a little bit, but that doesn't, to your point, there are things that even in those states, I can't imagine saying, would never, as an example for us, threaten, like, well, then we should just get a divorce. Like that's not something you come back from the next day. That's
Oh
going to
no,
be a
we
rework
don't
for,
have anything else to talk about.
yeah, I mean, there it coming back from that, when you've given air to it, it becomes a life in the back of your brains, whether you meant it to or not. And recovering from that in a relationship, I think, is a really daunting task. It's not that it can't be done. We know people that have, um,
Right.
but it's really dangerous. It's a really dangerous thing to throw out there, I think.
And I have a tremendous amount of regard for people that do deal with things like that, and they do argue or
Yep.
even throwing that, right, like the divorce, whatever, divorce, I'm leaving, whatever the case may be. I'm not built that way. For like, I, better or worse, whatever, like there's two things that just do not ever, will not ever float for me, because you've now let me know I'm out. You've let me know I'm out. Because how long do you have to think about something in your subconscious or conscious or whatever before you said it, before you were willing to express it, and you had to get that mad or whatever the situation was, that you belted that out? Well, you meant that. And I'm, whether, hey, you can apologize to me, we can get roses, flat, whatever you want to do. I ain't gonna forget that. That's always going to be in the back of my mind. But that divorce or whatever is one of them, and infidelity. That I'm out. You've already made a choice that wasn't me.
Yeah.
I'm out. It's not, it has nothing to do with you. I value me. If we weren't on the same sheet of music, you could have come to me. There's a lot of steps to that, right? Like, you could have come to me, we could have talked or whatever. Nope. That is the ultimate, especially Operation Trust issue over here. That I can never sleep in the bed. It'll never feel the same. I'm out. I can't do it. Those are just my two. We can't work through that. That's not going to be something I come to the table for. Moving on. Sorry. I got, damn. I went
Okay,
to the
I know all
ocean
this
on them.
already, so
Oh yeah, I put it to the bottom of the ocean on that shit. Sorry. People, I'm at the. Nah, I ain't gonna edit none of this shit. The I
you can
meant it.
edit my
I said it.
blubbering in the beginning. Or at some point.
I meant it. I said it. That is. What are some of the things, and we, it's going to be 2021. We've got a lot of new
Hmm.
coming to our team, whether it's branching out, got one that's leaving the nest, or driving around, got one that's about to learn how to drive. I don't know if I'm gonna have to get on some medications or something for that, and even one starting kindergarten, which I know I'm gonna have to get on some medications for that. So what are some of the things? Obviously, we're getting, I'm excited. There's a level of excitement to it and everything else. So let me not just be morbid and feel like it's melancholy. It's not. Uh, I have a level of excitement, especially for the oldest one. I feel like he is more than ready. There's obviously some things that experience will give him that we just won't be able to. Uh, but I am very excited to see what he produces. I think he is leaps and bounds ahead of where I was when I was his age, as far as level of maturity and understanding of who he is. I have a tremendous amount of respect for him for that, and some of the things that we've walked with him through, and everything like
Hmm.
that. That his journey was not simple by any stretch of the imagination, and he has
No.
definitely earned every accolade and everything else that he is receiving now. But what are the feelings for you moving into 2021, and how are you excited? What's the deal?
I am. I mean, it's hard to think that, I mean, there's certainly nothing changing. The first day of 2021, still in a pandemic, still short of vaccines for everybody, all the things that go back to what we knew as normal. And I'm not
Right.
sure that there's a going back in a lot of ways, just that there should be, from what we've learned from being locked down, and from taking better care of our planet to taking better care of ourselves, and the slowing down that we've learned. So I'm excited of trying to figure out, as things start to reopen, and get back to what could be a normalcy of seeing how we could implement some of the things I hope that we've learned in 2020. I'm excited. I probably will get emotional because it's hard for me to think um, of having one leave the nest. But as much as I worry about him being ready, I think he's ready. I hate that he's had to go half his junior year and all of his senior year likely without having the normalcy that you would normally have, and getting to do and be all the things that you get to do and be as a senior in high school. Um,
Right.
he's had an incredible journey, to your point, just throughout the time, but even in this year of coming back from a knee injury and surgery, and working through that, and seeing the level of tenacity, and um, having to overcome all that you have to overcome, of relearning how to use one of your limbs to a great degree, and training tendons and muscles. It was, God, watching your kid go through that is something else. And I'm super proud of him for all that he's done, um, and thankful for it. In some ways, I would never go back and, of course, not have him do that.
Right.
um,
Right.
but it's going through something, and I know that builds something, a level of character in yourself. And I know that, some of the things that the two of you got to do as a result of that together, and what that built in your relationship, watching that was really beautiful for me. So I'm excited to see what he does next. He's such a creative person. And he's got to figure it out to a degree, kind of what this life's going to look like for him. And I'm excited for him for that. But mourning it a great deal as well, trying not to think too far ahead. Certainly not wishing the days away on that one. Yeah, and then with the younger two, just those new phases always bring something cool and interesting, and as sometimes as difficult as they might be, um, they're hard and heavy because it's usually closing a chapter of some sort. But if you can focus on that, the door that it opens and the chapter that it starts, and look at it as beginnings rather than endings, I think there's a lot more excitement and joy that comes from that. And so I'm looking forward to that. Um, and it's 10 years for us. So there's that's a milestone that feels like it's supposed to be big, but in many ways it doesn't feel so big. And I don't mean to discount that. I I don't recall a time ever thinking we wouldn't get here. I definitely hoped that we'd be blessed enough to have it, to have the time. And so
Right.
I'm thankful that it looks like we will get there. We're not promised any day, so I don't want to, I should feel like I should be superstitious and knock on some wood or something. But I'm excited. I'm excited about hugging my friends around the neck again, and hopefully, and again, just seeing the new beginnings that are coming from us for us this year. It's a lot of stuff, and it's hard to not get overwhelmed by the the doors closing. But I'm trying to focus on those beginnings.
And it's very much the same for me. I think it's, as a dad, it's different in a lot of different ways. Especially, it's unique for me being I was never a step anything. I'm the kid's dad, so I'm fighting monsters in the middle of the night, uh, and I'm the door they knock on for to go fix something. But it's unique in that regard that I earned all of that. It
Mhm.
wasn't just given. So for me, it's bittersweet. I give them a little ribbon for the well. Now you've been criticizing your mom and me for so long. Like now we get to find out what the hell you're gonna do. I'm
Yeah.
jacked up for that, but not in the negative way that it feels like for anybody else. That would be in the negative connotation for him. I just he's so intelligent. He has so many natural gifts. I'm excited to see what he challenges himself to become and do. Armed with what I feel like is one of the most important things that I could give him, that toughness, that that ability to withstand and be challenged without responding, uh, without reacting, but I actually taking the time to respond. That's something that I didn't learn until later on in my life, and there's some regret for that for me, but in a lot of ways I'm grateful because it gave me a different perspective on what it what it feels like, what it will be for. So I'm pretty jacked up. He's got for all the things that 2020 and is taken. He's been gifted a new resolve, so I'm a little excited for that. For for my baby girl, I'm not as excited for her to learn how to drive. I will be completely open and candid. Uh, I think she's going to be excellent at it once I get through the parts where I faint and collapse because of stress. Once I get through those, I think the learning of the how to drive and how to do those things, I think that's going to be outstanding. She's going to be really really good at it, like she is at most of the stuff she does anyway. And for our little Tasmanian devil, Logan, uh, I I feel like I'm gonna need a sedative every day when he goes to school. Uh, I just I just probably will. Not because of what the school, like he'll be fine. I'm not worried about him. It's genuinely feeling like well, that's the last one. That's the last first day of kindergarten. That's the
Mhm.
last packing of the lunches and these types of things. Like they're doing having all those experiences and then the thralls of them, don't get me wrong, they suck and it's aggravating and
That's true.
you never make the right lunch for these ungrateful piglets. They always you give them peanut butter and jelly because they were talking about it the other day and trying to surprise them and whatever, and lo and behold they wanted ham and cheese, so you're a scumbag. I we've been through all that stuff, so getting the last ride as it were, to go through it one more time, there's some lamenting I will do for that, but yeah, I'm excited for 2021 because 2021 gave me what I grew up with. That you're on an island. Obviously, there's a tremendous amount of people that we've reached out to that we see that mean a lot to us that are in our circle that we keep in contact with. But for the most part, the ones that kind of fell away and fell off, that okay, you
Mhm.
recognize instead of going and doing, you didn't actually need to be going and doing anyway, and we've become extremely resilient as a family and kind of closed ranks and became better for it in a lot of different ways.
Mhm.
So that makes me I'm pretty jacked up for 2021 and what we're gonna do because I've got a very clear mindset on attacking instead of waiting to see what happens, just going out and doing what we feel like needs to be done. So I'm really really excited for what's coming up next.
More RV trips.
There it may be. It may be. Like I'm scared of somebody's RV. 7,587 miles. Do something. Like I'm scared of somebody's RV, which they might tell me about some RV. I'll RV right now. Don't threaten me with a good time. What what would you do different, if anything? Like
In
that's a
my
real
life?
question. In your entire, yeah, in the whole joint, yeah. What would you do, if anything, differently?
Oh, that's a tricky question. Um, because largely, maybe I've watched too many time traveling movies, but I think if you go back and do anything different, it doesn't lead you to the path that you're on today. And while I certainly would have, as I mentioned before, been taken more responsibility and been more accountable and responsible for myself and my choices and not been quite so wild at times. I think it I worry doing anything different means I'm not here. Um, I
Mm,
very firmly believe that the universe, God, whatever you believe in that brought us together would have ended in this story. But how that would have looked, I think, could be grossly different based on a lot of things. As examples of that would be, I having to grind and work from the bottom and, start in a job that was clerical call center, very, very low pay, is my first kind of real job. And I don't mean that to discount service industry because I think it's a very real job. I still have dreams about being in the weeds as a bartender and a server. So as recent as what, like 3 days ago.
that is, yes, yes.
um, so, but I had to work super hard, and people had to see that in me. That want to work hard, that want to collaborate, and just do good work with good people, um, and know that nothing was going to be handed to me, and that I had to sort of make up for it in a lot of ways, make up for not having a degree. I was super ashamed of that for a long time, and it bit me a couple of times. I even being at Microsoft for what was it, babe, like 5 years at
Mm,
the time. I was applying for an internal position, and the interviewer at the time gave me a no hire because what we call the as appropriate, which is like the most senior interviewer in the loop, because I didn't have my degree. 5 years at the company. Um, I that was so I've been there 13 years. So that was 8 years ago. Almost didn't do the math well there. Whoops. Um, but it's a really roundabout way just to say I I can't imagine doing things differently, even though I know I made 1,000,000,000,000,000,000 mistakes, that I would love to erase and undo, and to a certain degree, um, I'm afraid of what that would mean in doing that because we're so blessed to be where we are today. The relationships that I've had that were seasons of friends and even some family served a purpose. Um, the relationships that I've been able to create in my professional life that have continued to open doors, or give me more clarity on who I want to be as a career woman. All of those things are pieces I'm afraid I would lose to go back and do anything differently.
That's fair. Nothing. I wouldn't do a damn thing different. Nothing. I own, and I don't mean that to be, like
No,
I'm on that old school for you guys that look it up. Popeye the Sailor Man. I am what I am.
I am
Like I
what I am.
absolutely, I'm not the best guy that God ever put together. I'm not the worst. I try to do as much good as I possibly can within my means every single day. Uh, and all the missteps and mistakes that I've made have brought me exactly where I needed to be with all the information I needed to have. I feel like I would be
Hmm.
cheating the process of growth, cheating the process of uh, being the growing into, and I'm still growing into the man that I wanted to be when I lost my grandfather. That I'm getting there, and I can feel it, and it's making me more peaceful internally, probably not externally, but it's making me more peaceful, understanding who I've known who I am for a long time, but understanding how I want to be, how I want to vibrate in the world, and how I want to be. Uh, there's a saying: you teach people how to treat you. I've been doing that for a long time, and just understanding that giving that grace to them and allowing them to also reciprocate and also uh, do things. Even I've got a really close friend of mine. I'm not going to name his name. He's for real, like a brother to me. We fight about all types of stuff. But if the phone rings, I'm going. It's one of those deals. He just recently dropped off something for Christmas. To Christmas gift, whatever. We never get each other stuff, so it's whatever. But the that mattered so much to me.
Did you show it though?
But no, I told him, I expressed it, right, like
Yeah.
I expressed it to him, like how much it meant. But the reason it means more to me now, as I believe it would have before, is I've always been in positions in relationship, not my marriage or anything else, where if someone did something for me, I now have to do something for them. And I just didn't want you to do shit to begin with, because then I don't have to worry about doing something that it feels disingenuous if I didn't want to do it and then I do it anyway. I don't like that. I'm not that person. So that always, even someone, I'm difficult, and you obviously know this. I'm difficult to do anything for me because I don't need you to. I'll do it myself. I don't need you to do something for me. If you see something that you want to do, okay, and I'm working through that, and our relationship as well, whether it be something as simple as doing the dishes. It is almost, or has been, a violation of holy writ for my wife to do the dishes. That's not a fault of hers. I do the dishes because it gives me something that was accomplished for the day that I can control. That helps with my mental health. It genuinely does. I make up the bed every day. Like these things are things that I can set out and do and accomplish every single day. So it's been a conscious effort for me to just say thank you and express how I feel about the thing that was done, as opposed to the negative feeling of, well, why the hell did you do that? Now you feel, if I don't do something, then you feel like I wronged you, or, well, why did I do whatever? And now I'm in this, why did you put me in this position? You're a scumbag. Like, like I know how ridiculous that may sound to some of you, but that's very much how I feel, and how I've operated, because for one of the reasons, and we've gone to the bottom of the ocean on that too. I grew up that way, where it wasn't thing. Don't get me wrong, things were freely given, uh, expressions of love, all these other things, but it always felt to me like it was leveraged with how I acted, or what positive thing I was doing. Well, yeah, of course, even some individuals in our personal lives, like, yeah, you can hold me up now because it's easy,
Hmm.
because I'm not fighting people in the street and making negative headlines and so forth, or speaking out of school. Like, it's a different animal when you're not. Like, what would be the differential? Like, I'm always thinking about that other thing. So yeah, I wouldn't trade anything. I wouldn't do it a different way. I feel like I'm exactly where I need to be, and armed with all the tools that I'm going to need to dominate and take everything that that we have worked for. That's what I genuinely believe. And our children are pressing on my edges to make sure that I am absolutely prepared. And I affectionately look at it that way. Like every parent goes through something. Everybody's got their own hike to go through. But I am so grateful for obviously my person, my wife, my everything, but also my kids. I'm grateful to them because they have forced someone who is resolute in how they were going to be to do it a different way, to think about it a different way, to be receptive to how someone else feels, to be receptive to someone disagreeing with you that you can't cut off, that you can't just say, okay, well, we'll go do that and be in the woods and what, I don't care. Because I can't say that because they know I'm not in the business of saying something I didn't mean. And my daughter will call me to carpet like that, whether it's I said something that might have led to me saying something that was off limits or whatever. But she has been the leader, ambassador and coalition holder for making sure Dad is very measured in how he communicates and very understanding about a difference of opinion, not a point of fact, a difference of opinion. So no, I would not change anything, and I'm looking forward to slapping the shit out of 2021. That's a channel I'm on. But I know all the stuff you have to do today because I got to do the same shit. So I appreciate you more than I could ever tell you. You have saved my life. You have. I know it seems, well, damn, Jay, how many people saved your life? A bunch. A bunch of humans have made a village. I am the definition of it takes a village. But you are the queen of my planet. Period.
My king. Wouldn't do this life with anybody else, babe.
I'm not gonna. So you better figure it out.
Blood in, blood out.
Vatos Locos Homes. This has been another episode of From the Root to the Fruit. Please, if you enjoy the content, take the time to like and or subscribe. It helps the channel out a ton. I've been your host, Jay Smith, and this is my beautiful wife, Dawn Smith.
Did you forget my name just then? Did you forget my name?
I don't call you Dawn. What the hell are you talking about? I walk around the house calling you Dawn. What are we doing? Yeah, I had to think about what your name was, not because I thought you were somebody else, because I don't walk around our home calling you Dawn. Who does that?
Well, apparently Logan recently.
Logan's we know all about his. I know his. Yeah, I know what's in there. Take care of each other. See you later.
Peace.